What are you doing?
Who are you? Where are we?
What's going on here? All these questions.
You don't know, do you? You're just guessing, aren't you?
There's no more time for these absurd theories.
Well, what are you going to do?
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
They're very resourceful and cunning.
Why are you so suspicious of us?
Oh, yes, I admit they were very smart.
No, it's not a question of being smart.
Don't you see,
I won't let you do this.
It hurts here.
Where? Show me.
Here come the drums!
Hello and welcome to the brink of disaster. Oh, wow. We've got to get you back from this somehow. It's a good thing you have tuned into the only Doctor Who podcast that takes the entire television program in random and perhaps even reverse order now and then. I'm Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor, and yes, we are random and randomly destructive in our journey through Doctor Who canon. We take the rough with the smooth, we take the edge with the destruction, and it's been quite a journey, and we've arrived somewhere that I've kind of been afraid of almost all of my Doctor Who watching life. So.
Yeah, it's a bit of a return in some ways, but not a fast one. Not a fast return.
No, the long way around.
No. Yeah, really important that we delve into that. But before we can tell you about where we are, we must tell you where we were. We have to hit a switch and go back to some previous episodes. So, 3 stories ago, folks, we were at a planet, and it was a planet with Daleks on it. You might even call it a planet of the Daleks. That's certainly what it was called in the tourist brochures. We were on Spiridon, yes, hanging out with John Pertwee and Katie Manning and a bunch of blonde people in Planet of the Daleks.
I love the idea, by the way, of kind of a tourist, kind of cut price tourist agency that takes you to Spiridon. It's like the cut price Planet of the Daleks. Like if you can't afford the full trip to Skaro, you know, like wait a minute, this isn't Skaro. Oh, it's like the airport that's really really far away from Skaro.
And they give you those really bad, like, see-through ponchos that you have to wear because, like, all this the plants will, like, spray at you. And
yes,
they'll say, they won't even supply you with a parka. It's like you got to pack one.
Yeah, and you got to sign away your life before you go to Spiridon.
Probably a good idea whenever you get into some kind of a planet where the Doctor's been. But we had to go from that planet to something else. Was it a planet? Was it a miniature castle within some kind of dial? We're still investigating what was going on for those 4.5 billion years that the Doctor was inside it. That was right. It was, of course, the Peter Capaldi, now New Who classic, Heaven Sent.
Yes,
good times.
With our good friend Elisa Stern helping us out.
That's right.
That was her favorite episode, so she took the long way around, joining us back on the podcast for that.
Yeah, definitely one worth checking out. Got a bunch of short videos going around on our socials, by the way. If you want to check those out, those are fun. But we couldn't spend too much time, certainly not the time that we would have needed to fully experience that confession dial over and over again. Although maybe we did, and we just don't remember. Who knows? But the
exactly right. This is like the 4.5 billionth version of us actually going through on this random journey.
So we wanted to go back for some reason to the Pertwee era.
That was a fast return.
That was a fast return
to the Pertwee era.
Yeah, and to an episode with many firsts. The first time we see the Sontarans, the first time the planet Gallifrey is named, and the first time we ever met Miss Sarah Jane Smith on her journey with the Doctor. Not us, we've seen her many times, but the first time the Doctor saw her in The Time Warrior. And who is the Time Warrior? Did we ever answer that? I guess that's that was the Sontaran.
Yeah, Lynx, the Time Warrior. Spoiler alert. But yeah,
because you could make a case for the Doctor if you think about it, or even the little robot thingy. But Yeah.
We're all really time warriors. The
Are we?
real time warriors were the friends we made along the way. But yes, we were there, and that, of course, was my introduction to Doctor Who as a baby. That was the very first episode that I sat in front of. So that was our fast return. And then, what did the randomizer do, Pete?
Well, it loves living on the edge. You know that. It's always seat of the pants. It's always jumping back unexpectedly. And we have gone way back. We have perhaps gone almost to the origin of a television program formed out of the little particles of actors and producers and film reels all coalescing near the beginning. We're almost about to hit it. We should do something. Maybe we could stop at season 1, serial 3, The Edge of Destruction.
That's right. It is, and wow, what a trip that is. I mean, if you're a fan of the classic Doctor Who comic strip, it's called Time Slip, right? The one where he goes back, he's
right,
Tom Baker, and he goes back to Hartnell.
Yeah,
this is a big part of Doctor Who, is that sort of sense of vertigo you get as you are traveling fast, either to the very beginning or the very end. Like, either you're like Captain Jack on the TARDIS in Utopia as it screams to the end of time to try and shake him off, or there's something time slippy about going backwards, and I really felt that vertigo going from Heaven Sent
right
all the way back to Edge of Destruction via a brief stop for my first ever story. It definitely gives you that sense of like, oh, we're going back here, the vertigo, and then to see this thing. And by the way, so we've talked about the randomizer doing seasonally appropriate programming. And we don't always talk about when we're recording the episodes, because often it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But it is Sunday, November the 3rd, when we're recording this. And I think that's an important thing to point out, because you, listener, are in the future. You are past the branch point of the 2024 US election. But we are before it. We are before it. And
that's right.
There is something of an Edge of Destruction feeling right now, because we're on the edge of something. We don't quite know what. Also, I'll point out, November the 3rd, like Day of the Dead was, the big celebrations were here in San Francisco yesterday.
All Souls Day as well.
Yeah, when the barrier between the living and the dead is very thin, right? It's very, it's all the Halloween-y stuff. So we've got some scary vibes here in Edge of Destruction. And speaking of the barrier between the living and the dead being very thin, I just spent last night with William Russell's voice in my head. Of course, who played in Chesterton, Chesterfield, and Charter.
Sounds like a pretty good fever dream so far. We got All Souls Day, Ian in your head. But what was really going on, Chris?
What's really going on with the Edge of Destruction? I think that this may be one of the most properly scary stories in Doctor Who.
Oh, I agree with you.
And
we're going to get into it.
Ever since I read the Peter Haining book, the Doctor Who Celebration, this was my introduction to a lot of the Doctor Who stories in a lot of ways. And I remember reading the description for Edge of Destruction in this and thinking, wow, that sounds intense. They got it that intense that early. So I've been thinking about this for some years, and I kind of knew it was going to be freaky. And I really didn't expect it to be freaky in the ways that it was.
And it was so freaky, I was trying to get you to confess that you listened to the novelization, right?
Oh, yeah. So William Russell...
that was...
Reading the
Just explain the William Russell thing.
Yes, I had William Russell... No, it wasn't that I was talking to the great beyond. William Russell, who only recently passed through the Veil. Another Heaven Sent connection there. But no, he's reading the audiobook. And if you're on Spotify, you can actually go listen to that audiobook.
Nice. Yes. And if you're in my home, you can read The Edge of Destruction, which I have actually one of the Target novels that I have. I don't have all of them. I have some of them. But yeah, I've had this one for a while. You can tell when it was published by the the McCoy logo there.
Right. Yes, 89. And then 2011
that
is
up a
when
little
William
closer.
Russell records it as an audiobook. And there's a lot more going on in that than there is in the story. So we'll talk about that. There's definitely some
We will talk about that, but
enhancements.
well after another scary moment in this podcast
wow.
for at least one of us, and I believe it has to do with the Whomoji challenge. That's right, they've reached the part of the show where I get to torture Chris by naming to him certain emojis. Those emojis will correspond to a title of a Doctor Who story, and he must guess the title, lest we go round and round and round for hours and turn this into a podcast that just keeps looping back and back and back until the universe reboots.
Yes, but before you Whomoji challenge me, how about this nightcap, Pete? How about just a nice
idea.
beverage?
Let me grab that from you.
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, just now you might be feeling a little sleepy.
Oh, wow. Hold on. Yeah. Well, or maybe, hold on. Let me grab some scissors here. See if I could poke them through
God.
the camera. No, we're not doing that. We are instead going to read out some emojis. These are from a set that came to us from David Emmerich. Some of them are rather long. This is actually one of the shorter ones, if you can believe that. It's only 6 emojis.
Only 6. Okay.
All right.
6-parter.
This is it. Are you ready, sir?
Nope, but I'm hitting the fast return switch on this one.
Okay. Well, it's coming at you. Coming at you fast. It's melting clocks along the way. First emoji is a doctor.
Okay.
Second emoji is also a doctor.
Okay.
Third emoji is a military helmet. The fourth emoji is a glass that is spilling liquid. The fifth emoji is an African American woman with her hand up. And the sixth emoji is an alarm clock with the bells. So I'm going to paste all that in the chat for you. Boom.
Military.
How do you like that?
I don't.
How do you like that apple cider?
2 doctors, military helmet, spilling liquid, woman with the hand up in the time. Oh God. I mean, it's not the 2 doctors.
It is not the 2 doctors.
Right. Could it be Power of the Doctor?
Good guess, but wrong.
Oh. I'm trying to think of fugitive Doctor stories. Which maybe I'm way off base there. But the liquid, the military helmet, those things are throwing me. But I'm just going to say fugitive of the Jadoon.
Another good guess. Wow, really good guess, but also wrong.
Oh, God. Am I right in saying that it's New Who?
You are right in New Who, yes.
Yes, okay.
I'll give you another hint. This is one that comes up fairly often, actually, on the podcast.
Oh. Okay, well, that just makes it even more embarrassing if I can't get it. The military helmet's really throwing me. I mean, does that mean it's a unit story?
It's not. I can't really say. I will say the military helmet factors into the very first scene.
Oh, no. Okay. Are we... Is the woman Martha... Is it a Martha story?
Not a Martha story.
Oh.
But I'll give you another hint.
Yes, please.
That might give it away.
Mm-hmm.
The dark-skinned woman is referring to a companion.
It's referring to a companion, but not Martha?
Yeah, I've kind of given it away now.
Oh God. Wow. Why is my companion mind now going blank?
Oh, come on.
Is it okay? So it's got to be Bill. But the two doctors, is it Twice Upon a Time?
It's Twice Upon a Time!
And the military
There
helmet
you
must be
go.
a World War I military helmet. But the spilled liquid, what's the spilled liquid?
Well, that's like the brandy.
The brandy.
Right? He's got the brandy in the TARDIS.
He's got the brandy in the TARDIS.
Which we've talked about.
Gotta be a better emoji for brandy.
Well, I mean, doesn't it get spilled or something? I think maybe that's a part of the plot. I don't know. I can't remember. But not bad. Actually, pretty bad.
But not really in it. Yeah, no, that's terrible. That's terrible. No, please hold your applause. Okay, but yes, the two.
Yeah, it was pretty cool that you went to almost every other episode with multiple doctors and New Who.
Yeah, and I was thinking Fugitive Doctor, but
Fugitive Doom was a good one because that's a two-doctor story for sure, and Power of the Doctor as well. That's actually even more.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Twice Upon a Time, great one. Look forward to going there in the pod. We haven't been there yet, but
the great one. Wait, what are we talking
about? Twice Upon a Time. Yeah,
the great one. All praise to the great one.
Yes. We've been driven a little bit mad by this random journey, I think. It's kind of coming out in many ways. Things are falling apart here at Porto Open Towers. So before we go too far, you might want to help us. If you're on Spotify, help us. Pull from the bottom of the screen to release us. Yes, that's right. It's poll to open. You can take a look at that right now. You can rate Edge of Destruction, one of our 7 ratings, which we'll explain at the end of the podcast. But those polls are open. They stay open. If you're in line, stay in line. Unless, unlike the forthcoming US election, these polls will be open for almost forever. There is no fast return switch on them. But we do have some results right now from a past poll for Planet Asterisk of the Daleks. And if you remember, I rated that a Lady Cassandra.
You were definitive.
That's right, paper thin.
That was it.
But man, those purple fake fur clothing items worn by the Spyrodons was cool, and
and the flashlight eye stock. Who could forget? Who could forget the Dalek Supreme?
And you rated it a Zarbi.
That's right.
Which is our new rating for So Bad It's Good.
Yeah.
And the winner was one that neither of us picked, which is a Dalek. The
Dalek
wins with 36% of the vote. The Ogron and the Fixed Point in Time in equal second place. So half of you thought this was just beyond rating, often for reasons of nostalgia. Well, actually a 3-way tie. Sorry, Ogron, Fixed Point in Time, and Zarbi all on around 80%. And then the Lady Cassandra in last place. The Hater and the Banger not even rating. But yes, I have been outvoted. You've been outvoted too, although slightly less. And people liked Planet of the Daleks overall.
I think what they're thinking about is this is probably the best Dalek Pertwee episode. At least I think it was regarded that way for a long time. It's like 6 episodes. And at the time, wasn't the new quote unquote special effects improved version. I think it's improved of Day of the Daleks hadn't been out, and Death to the Daleks is sort of widely considered just not a kind of a cash grab. A Doctor Who Dalek, like it's kind of what I called it. So I think that's why it's sort of elevated beyond its flaws, right? It's like, this is Pertwee plus the Daleks at their best. Which I can understand that. But it is telling that a couple people, enough of them, thought it was an Ogron as well, right? Like, in other words, some people think it's pretty bad, Fixed Point in Time. Some people just can't sort of rate it, etc. So yeah, like I'm pretty confident in my Zarbi. Yeah. There's a lot of bad stuff, but it is very memorable. It's there's a lot going on here.
It certainly is. I'll not forget the Doctor's IKEA furniture anytime soon, or the frost appearing on his face. Very, very weird, very 70s. But two things, it's definitely not Viscount Banger or Professor Hater. Nobody gave it those ratings. So anyway, thank you for supporting Pull to Open. Keep on voting. and keep on supporting us also through YouTube, where you can like and subscribe, become a true companion or a Viscount. You can appear between us right now if you're one of those many Edge of Destruction fans out there. You're like, damn it, I want to be on that podcast. You could have been here right now. This could have been us, but you playing because you are not paying for True Companion or Viscount or a super thanks. You give us a super thanks. That's a one-time version. You can also support us on Patreon. You can support us on Spotify. If you figure that out, let us know. But now it is time to...
Is it time?
Is it time? Do we have anything else to talk about before it's time? Before we just go straight into the commentary without doing anything else?
I think we just fly right into it.
Yeah,
let's go.
right.
Okay, so what I think of this episode is, you know what? Actually, come to think of it, I need a reminder of what exactly happened in this episode before I can really judge it. Chris, do you mind just summarizing the story in record time?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I hadn't even thought of doing that, but yeah, no skin off my nose.
Well, tell you what, in this brand new feature that we're doing here, I'm just going to make up some rules. I'm going to say 30 seconds per classic episode. How's that? Think you can do it? I'll give you a whole minute for this one.
A whole minute, yeah. I mean, do we have any melting clocks that can track that minute?
No, but I could probably do an EMP in your immediate area to fry all your clocks, so they just wouldn't work.
All right. Well, yes. No worry. Absolutely no worry at all. We can survive another minute. By the way, listeners, we're going to self-destruct in 30 seconds. I'm not telling Pete, so he doesn't know. But let him think that we've got a minute to do this.
Your audio cut out there for a second, buddy. All right.
It's weird. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just
okay.
Word to the audience.
All right. Well, in this segment, I guess you might say it's too long. Didn't read, but we're watching. So why don't we call it TLDW for too long didn't watch?
Hey, that also includes the initials of the show that we're talking about. That's funny.
Oh yeah, you could just call it TL Too Long Doctor Who. Love it.
Doctor Who Too Long Didn't Watch. This is a great idea. I think we're onto something here. I think just to make it even harder, I should close all my tabs.
Yeah, no notes. You got to do it from memory.
I got to do it from memory. Not even a felt tip reminder written on. I mean, arguably, this T-shirt's a bit of a spoiler for listeners who are not watching the video. I'm wearing the the destroyed TARDIS from the Van Gogh painting in
nice
in Big Bang.
All right, I'm going to just add one more twist to this whole exercise, and I want you to do this in Old High Gallifreyan.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if YouTube actually puts that in as a translating language.
Yeah,
it's just too old. It's not going to come out unless you're near a TARDIS. No one's going to understand it. So let's just do it normally in English, and we're going to start it.
The High Gallifreyan version just now. I don't know if the feed cut out, or maybe you didn't have enough dimensions to hear the description.
That could have been it.
I also included the Doctor's actual name in High Gallifreyan.
I might have just accidentally rewound by a minute too, so we just got to do it again anyway. Okay. So, all right, are you ready, sir, for this fun new segment we're doing here?
Nope. Can we put it off?
All right, it's happening in just a few seconds. That's right. It's time for the official pull to open summary of The Edge of Destruction in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan are in the TARDIS, but there's an explosion at the console. Everyone gets knocked out, and they've kind of got amnesia, and everyone's feeling a bit weird and acting a bit weird, and there's some photographs of the screen of where the TARDIS has been recently, and they can't figure out, and Susan's attacking people with scissors, and Ian's trying to get water from a water and milk machine, and everyone's just sort of being weird and kind of attacking each other. The Doctor knocks people out with a sleeping draft. Then Ian comes up and almost strangles
30
him.
seconds.
And they figure out what's happening. The TARDIS is literally on the edge of destruction. And they think something's come in. But like there's stuff going on with the console. But Barbara figures it out eventually. She sees some melting clocks. She figures the time's being taken away. And they figure out that the switch, the fast return switch, is stuck. And the TARDIS has been trying to tell them this. And they're actually heading towards the birth of the solar system. But they figure it out. And the Doctor sorts everything out in the console. And then he apologizes to Barbara for being a dick.
Nice. Those are her exact words. Great job.
Thank you.
All right, we might do that segment again. Yeah, that's the Edge of Destruction. There's pretty straightforward. They're although kind of not in the way it's performed. I must say this story is kind of I don't know if ahead of its time is the appropriate thing to say.
I think so, because look, on a meta level, like without even knowing the history of any of it, on a meta level, the first thing I got from watching this was it's almost like they're trying to destroy Doctor Who before it even gets off the ground. You know what I'm saying?
Explain.
Because like everything is so weird and so sort of like it feels like deliberately wrong, and they're just attacking each other for no reason, and it's just the dialogue's chopped up and all over the place, and we don't even know what's going on, and it just looks like the show is sort of taking its own concept and tearing it apart before it's even begun, disassembling everything.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of bold in a sense.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of like having everyone be mean to each other, and Susan's wielding scissors, and the Doctor's extra mean, and
now I knew
it's
about
all
the scissors, by the way, but not until you watch it do you see that those are some giant scissors. Holy cow! Like, do not run with those things, kids.
Yeah, she knows how to use them, though.
She really does.
She's close. She seems to have some experience in that stabbing motion, which might be. Yeah, go on.
What I love about the history of Edge of Destruction is that this, after 7 episodes of the Daleks, this is what gets people activated, and people writing in, and the BBC complaining to Verity Lambert that this is too scary for kids. Not the Daleks, but the scissors.
Is this it? This is the beginning of the Doctor Who's love-hate relationship, perhaps, with the censors. I guess what's the name of the department? Is it a government department or a BBC department? There's some department that handles this, right?
The children's department come up to Verity Lambert, which, of course, Verity Lambert famously, when she took on the producer role of Doctor Who, and Sidney Newman asked her, "Do you know anything about kids?" She's like, "Nope, not a thing." So I
emerged from a loom, Sidney.
Yes, but she's like it's almost good that she didn't, right? That she didn't have kids of her own to think, oh God, this is going to be too scary for them. Like, I'm not going to put that scissor scene in, because this is really the beginning of a Doctor Who being just a little bit too scary, just a little bit scarier than it should be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely, and I think one of the things is that everyone's acting weird.
Yeah.
And you're not sure if it's some force or if something's happened to them. But we've gotten to know at this point in the show that, they're the heroes, and we're liking Ian and Barbara at the very least, even though the Doctor's at this point still a little bit of an anti-hero.
Yep.
We've cheered him on against the Daleks in the previous story, but at this point, they come in, the TARDIS gets shocked around, and then everybody is just like, what? Like, it's like everyone's hit reset on what they know, and it's like everyone's got amnesia. And so, like, it immediately kind of intrigues you. Like, oh, okay, this is a conundrum, which deliberate choice of words, because in subsequent years, I don't think Doctor Who's done anything quite like this. I was actually racking my brains before we sat down. Did they ever do anything where you're just sort of thrown into some weird situation and everyone's acting weird? Not really. I feel like Time Heist sort of comes close.
Yes, Time Heist is a great example. I mean, you could argue that there are similarities to Time and the Running here.
Right. There's a little bit of that because everyone's sort of unconscious at on the floor of the TARDIS, but nobody regenerates this time.
Yes.
But I chose the word conundrum because the comparable episode I would throw out is actually a Star Trek episode from The Next Generation, which was called Conundrum. And it's basically everyone gets their memories removed and they sort of have to figure out that they're Starfleet officers and what they're doing and stuff. So that seems a little bit similar here. Here, there's sort of a violent component attached to it, which I can sort of understand why there might be a little bit of concern, certainly from a 1960s audience.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's not actually amnesia, right? Because Ian and Barbara, in the novelization, they kind of make it a little more explicit that they're having a vision that they're both in the staff room at Coal Hill School. And they're like, oh, well, what are you doing here? And oh, Susan's gone to do that. Oh, Susan Foreman? Yeah. So it's almost like the show has kind of rewound to before An Unearthly Child in this attempt to shake off this the terrifying future of Doctor Who that it has seen for itself.
Yeah, it's like they're kind of in a shared fever dream.
Yeah.
You know? And they're just kind of wandering around and trying to figure things out. And it really depends on William Russell and Jacqueline Hill to kind of sell the moments where they have sort of pain and realizations. I mean, the budget on this one, just to zoom out, was like nothing, right? Like this was the first filler episode. They had to
the budget for this. So they were allotted £2,500 per episode. They actually spent less than that for these two episodes. They spent around about 3,000 for the two together. That's when £3,000 is real money. But that was it. It was super cheap, cheaper than you could possibly imagine. Which I don't even know what that £3,000 was spent on.
It was probably those photos on the scanner.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that, to me, was the creepiest part. That was the part where I was like, I'm watching this, I'm feeling quite a sense of vertigo.
Why that part?
Because you're looking at the photos on the scanner, and you're like, haha, they're just photographs. It's cheap early Doctor Who. You don't have the budget for actual video on the scanner. And then the Doctor says, why, that's just a photograph. And you're like, there's a bit of a jump, like, whoa. Like, he's breaking the fourth wall there. Like, you're not supposed to point out, Doctor, how cheap the effects are on Doctor Who. Like, what's going on here? So that may be a little bit uncomfortable. Like, normally it's like just us in the living room being snarky. And now William Hartnell wants to join in on our Mystery Science Theatre 3000 kind of snark at the show that he's in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive that they make tension and peril out of these kind of lousy visuals, right? And there's one that I think didn't work for me, which was the melting clock, which unfortunately it's like the video quality, you're not really sure what you're even looking at. You can't even really quite tell it's a clock, to be honest with you. And so when everyone gets really sort of concerned and upset about it, I was like, well, what's the deal? And even honestly, even if it is a melting clock, you kind of think, well, again, why are you so upset? Still, it works because they're all kind of still acting weird. There's obviously something just sort of going on with their psyche in this one.
The melting,
but then
how do you do a melting clock without referencing Dali? I don't know. But yeah, somehow Barbara gets the clue from the melting clocks that time is being taken away from us. Pete, can you make that make sense?
Well, it's like, here's a clock. It's melting. I think maybe if the TARDIS could speak, it would say, no, Barbara, I meant you're out of time.
And time. Said the TARDIS after its own TLDW challenge.
It's like, as long as she gets there, she's putting things together one way or the other. I mean, she seems like, I guess in this whole thing, the one who is the most normal, right? So Ian's off. He gets smacked around, and I think he's the one who touches the console, right? So he ends up getting face planted on the floor of the TARDIS.
Yeah.
The Doctor is out of it for a good chunk of the first episode, and he seems like really, really like angry and paranoid. Like all of those circuits within him are turned to the max. And Susan, as we were just talking about, goes full psycho for at least most of the first episode. So it's a lot of scariness. Yeah.
The Doctor roofies his companions.
Yes, he does.
I mean, we've just, talk about Me Too. My goodness, like we've just been to the first episode in the Time Warrior where the show sort of explicitly acknowledges that it's a bit weird that the Doctor keeps chasing around after young women. And now he's roofing his companions. Well, yeah, you put the two together and you've got some Me Too charges there. But also, like Ian... William Russell, the way that he acts in Being Weird, has got this sort of weird, creepy, sort of shambling kind of predatory aspect to it. That kind of reads differently in this day and age.
Well, what do you mean specifically? I didn't quite get that vibe.
I mean, there's one point where he's like closing in on Susan, who's asleep. And he's got this he's got this leer on his face, and we read that a little bit differently in the 21st century, I think. I was like, what could happen in that situation?
But this was after she was doing stuff with the scissors and stuff,
yes.
right?
Oh, absolutely. So, but like he's being weird. You could definitely see a kind of, not safe for work version of this. You could definitely see a much creepier kind of, modern reshoot that would be, way too adult for a Doctor Who audience. But like, you could get even more sort of super psychologically creepy with this now if you filmed it now. And
totally
more than £3,000. But
it's always you can't do it too much in that turning your heroes into villains and sort of taking their what makes them interesting as heroes and sort of twisting them a bit. It is fun to do, and I would encourage shows to do it. I would point again to Star Trek and the Mirror Universe stuff they tend to do. They tend to sort of have fun with that, and stuff like where Kirk's confidence and command in one universe becomes this sort of tyrannical evil person in the other, and so it's fun to do, but again, you kind of one and done once you've done it. But I would encourage New Who to try something like this in terms of storytelling and doing that that idea of one plunging our characters into a weird situation right off the bat. And then, breathing on some of that anti-hero stuff, which I don't know if you could do it again with the Doctor, even though they've done it. I mean, they do it regularly, but like in this particular part of Doctor Who in the beginning, when they were still figuring out what the show was and who even that character was, this episode is probably the last that really shows him as an anti-hero, as like, okay, he's the guy that isn't just sort of this grandfatherly figure. Sometimes our heroes, that being Ian and Barbara, kind of have to work against him or in spite of him, at least.
Yeah, I'd say that the one word that keeps coming to mind about Edge of Destruction is unsafe. The feeling of unsafety. Nothing is safe about this, including watching this as a Doctor Who fan, because we're so used to the Doctor being our friend, being a nice, well, not a nice guy, often quite not a nice guy, but still always our friend. And there are things like, Kill the Moon that kind of get the closest maybe in the modern era to playing with this notion, the Doctor as an anti-hero, that he'd just skip out. But that's just skipping out isn't the worst time. Not like roofing his companions. Like the sense of unsafety here, of like, what even is this show? You're almost like, stop, you're destroying the show, even though they're like right back at the beginning of it, right? But we should talk about the way that this inspires so many things going forward. This thing that was almost literally written on the back of a napkin. David Whittaker, one of the founding fathers of Doctor Who, as it were, kind of wrote it in a weekend, very fast. Barely even knew what he was doing. I think the script shows that. It's a lot of it just sort of feels kind of nonsensical in the dialogue. But almost like deliberately, almost like a Samuel Beckett play, or a Pinter play. Like there's so much silence here. That's the other thing. There's barely any music.
There's barely any music, and there's not, like I say, Barbara sort of ends up being the sensible person, but she's also affected by whatever's going on. So you don't quite have the cipher, the guide that you normally do. And I think, as an audience, as an audience member sort of watching this, you feel like really unsettled. And like, I like that what you said, like the word unsafe is perfect for just what this feels like. And it's certainly like with the doctor saying that, I'm going to throw you off the ship, like at that point in the second episode. And he seems to imply he's going to do it then and there, like I'm almost like mid-flight or something, right? Like it's like we're just going to we're going to space you guys. Like I don't think that's quite what he means, because they talk about, well, we don't even know what's out there. It could be a frozen wasteland. It could be a planet. And he was like, I don't really care what it is. I just want you off. Very, very different from the Doctor that we sort of know and love. If you think of anything, you can't even imagine Matt Smith saying anything like that. Maybe some of the darker moments of Tom Baker or something, but this is really dark stuff.
It's really dark, and arguably darker than the Doctor strangling Perry.
Right. Arguably, for sure.
I mean,
even though they're both kind of not themselves, arguably. But
he doesn't, offer Perry a sleeping draft first. I mean, the fact that the Doctor threatens to space them, he's getting all paranoid. He's saying that they were trying to force him to go back to England, which also doesn't make sense because he says that he's trying to return them. And what is even going on here? I mean, behind the scenes, we shouldn't get too far without saying that this kind of literally was the edge of destruction at a certain point before Doctor Who even began.
Oh, because it hadn't been renewed yet.
It hadn't been renewed. And in fact, there was a brief moment in October of 1963 where it was cancelled. And I just love that about Doctor Who history. It was kind of cancelled. Like cancellation is always, the threat of cancellation is always hung over Doctor Who, including before it even started. Like it was cancelled before it was born. And at the point that they were writing this, like this was just potential filler for the 12th and 13th episodes, because that was all it had been allotted. A 13-episode run. And this was it.
Yeah, pretty much.
This could have been the end of Doctor Who.
They never found the switch. It'd be like a MacGruber sketch. It's like, oh, it's this switch. Just press it. Boom! Doctor Who!
Yes. We hope you've enjoyed watching Doctor Who. William Hartnell will be back in the Army game next week. It's strange, isn't it, to think, because I mean, would they have kept the cliffhanger? I don't know.
With the foot, with the Marco Polo tease. Maybe.
Marco Polo tease. Remind me, by the way. So we see at the end of this, we've been to Marco Polo. There's a footprint in the snow. We're supposed to think Yeti, right? We're supposed to think Abominable Snowman. Do they explain why it's a large footprint at the beginning of Marco Polo? We've been there. I don't even remember.
I don't think they do. I do think it is in the novel or something that just says, oh, it's melted. So it's obviously it's a boot footprint that's been melted a bit. So it's bigger.
Cliffhangers in this era a little bit rubbish. Like the cliffhanger within Edge of Destruction, right? The end of episode 1, some hands are coming out and strangling the Doctor. They think it's someone else on the ship, and then episode 2, oh, it's just Ian. He's just playing around. Yeah.
So, I'd love to talk a little bit about the fast return switch.
Yes.
Which has been...
I see you've got that marked and felted pen on the desk in front of you.
Yeah, that I did. I mean, it's funny, like, you get the impression that the official label broke off or something, that the Doctor sort of made his own, right? But the fast return switch, okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think it's been sort of done to death in other media and folks, we're not the first people to talk about it. But to recap, the fast return switch is the thing he pressed at the end of the Daleks because he knew Skaro was in the, quote, future, and he wanted to essentially come back to 1960s London to get Ian and Barbara back. So he pressed the fast return switch. So what does this do, right? Does it literally take him to the past in whatever zone or place he happens to be? Or is it more like the take me to the last channel I was watching thing
Yes.
on a TV, remote.
Is it
And
Star 69, but for the TARDIS? Is it?
yeah, because it's like neither one of those really works, right? Because if it's like the rewind, if it's like the last channel, then presumably it would go back to the prehistoric times.
Yeah.
Where he was, because that was where he was in between. So that's kind of where my mind goes. I know there's a lot of explanations out there for how this works. My thinking is that the Doctor is just so absent-minded, he forgot about the whole caveman stuff.
Yes.
and he just thought, oh, right. Like, I'm just going back to 1963 London because that's where I was. He says, no, he's put the caveman stuff all out of his head.
Yeah.
And he just totally forgot that they went somewhere else.
I love the idea that there is a version of this story where they hit the fast return switch and we're back with the tribe of Gum.
Ah.
Welcome, guys. That's a good segue, too.
Speaking of,
hey.
This story, The Edge of Destruction, is referred to in this adventure, one of my favorites. It is the Hunters of the Burning Stone.
Yes, which I read.
And this is kind of where it sort of brings us back to the whole idea of the Doctor as an anti-hero and how he sort of changes in the first season. So I guess there's three things you can look at. What was happening behind the scenes, what was happening on the show, and then what's happening in Doctor Who when you incorporate Hunters of the Burning Stone. So just to quickly go over those. In the show, what happens in this story seems to be kind of the explanation for how the Doctor is a little bit different after this episode. He's still crotchety, he's still old, he still has a short temper. But this outright sort of villainous stuff stops. And the reconciliation with Barbara here at the end seems to be the main gateway to that. That he feels deep regret for what he was going to do, even though I think we can take from this episode his mind was a little off, right? Like somehow the TARDIS telepathic circuits or whatever, and what it was doing to try to warn them on this stuff, maybe pushed him even further down that sort of villain route. That's what I'd like to think anyway. And we can talk about the TARDIS too. So anyway, that's the explanation in here. I think it's not that sufficient. And Hunters of the Burning Stone adds a couple of layers to it. One, it points out that Marco Polo apparently happens over a long period of time. So in other words, the Doctor and his companion spend months together in China. And that gives them a really long time to really get to know each other and matter to each other. And so it sort of puts that in. But it also has this great layer, and I don't want to spoil it for folks, but it basically, in summation, like Ian and Barbara end up inspiring the Doctor because they are so good at just being his companions and standing up to the challenges the universe is throwing at them, that this is sort of the gateway to him taking on more and more companions, right? Because he clearly didn't do that until he met Ian and Barbara. And it's a really beautiful take, which fits completely with what happens in the show and the show's history. Is why Hunters in the Burning Stone works so well. And it is sort of this turning point in the point in the story where the Doctor, this is actually the 11th Doctor, he's talking to Ian, and the Doctor's saying like, he's not proud of himself, and he's saying, yeah, I nearly threw you off the ship when it was my problem. It was my fault for wrecking the switch. And he was feeling bad about that. And then Ian's the one to step in and say like, oh, but we really got to know each other in China right after that. So it all turned out well, which was kind of cool. And I really like layering on this story, Hunters of the Burning Stone.
Really, really great story.
Yeah, with Edge of Destruction. Now, just here's the panel. If I can see it. Whoop. Are you seeing that?
I can see it. Yes, perhaps we could read Ian's dialogue.
Yeah, it's basically like he says, when the TARDIS was nearly destroyed, I refused to acknowledge my mistake and blamed you. I almost threw you off the ship, abandoning you to die. That's the Doctor. And then Ian says, but things soon started to change on that epic journey with Marco Polo. We had months to get to know each other, to rely on each other. The four of us, you, me, Barbara, and Susan, we became a team. No, far more than that. We became a family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Beautiful.
So that's one way of slotting Edge of Destruction into Doctor Who canon. Of course, another way that we should talk about is that it's the first real indication that the TARDIS is alive.
Yes.
It establishes a lot about the TARDIS. First of all, it's kind of messed up. It's kind of held together with bits of string and sticky tape,
Melting clocks.
and melting clocks, and felt tip pen on the control pad. Like, I really wish that they would just make that canon, that there's, instead of having a hammer attached to the central console, maybe for the next version of the TARDIS interior, they can just have like a felt tip pen on a piece of string attached to it, so the Doctor can note down what all the switches are if he forgets.
It'd be hilarious just he's got little handwritten notes all over the console. They should totally do that. It'd be
Post-it
awesome.
notes. Yeah. That's what.
Well, they forget the notes even. Like, just writing right on the console. Like,
Yeah. On the console, on his hand, up his arm. Like that seems very doctorish to do something like that. But it really, like, would you have things like the Doctor's wife without the Edge of Destruction, right? Yes, in Unearthly Child, Ian says it's alive, but he's sort of, it's kind of clear that he means that just in the sense that, like, it's humming, it's vibrating, it's on, it's switched on.
right.
But this is the first time that we see that TARDIS is actually alive, that it sets really, really terrible scavenger hunts. And then it has just all this really quirky stuff inside it. And we wouldn't necessarily have seen any of that if there'd not been this necessity for a bottle episode, right? So
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, so much groundwork is laid here. I mean, there's everything about the TARDIS telepathic circuits that we hear about later, and then I think in the classic series, they still kind of stuck with the TARDIS being a machine, and the Doctor calls it a machine in this episode even. He says, my machine can't think.
Yeah, so this is the Doctor learning himself that the TARDIS is alive.
I think that's what we have to sort of take it as, that he's fairly unfamiliar, at least with, he might know about TARDISes as someone who grew up on Gallifrey, but probably didn't pay too much attention in the class that taught him about him, and always sort of thought of them more as a machine. And, they've done a pretty good job of, doing 6 of one, half a dozen the other, right? Even in something like the Doctor's wife, that is a strange one-off thing that happens that puts TARDIS energy in a person. So is the TARDIS actually conscious? Is it, like, not really in the same way that we can be, like, I think you sort of have to take that from that if he could just talk to the TARDIS like it was an entity, he would all the time, but he can't, because it is still on some level a machine. Despite being sort of like, it's almost religious in a way, right? It's almost like Doctor Who's version of the Holy Trinity is what the TARDIS is.
Yeah.
It's all these things at once. But in this episode, he says it can't think, even though it's clearly trying to warn them about impending doom.
So clearly, using melting clocks and light. Real clear TARDIS. Good job, Idris.
And it's also like, if you think about the central problem in the episode, it really emphasizes that it's a machine, right? Because it's like the spring is broken, therefore the switch just keeps going. Yes. And it keeps it going into the past, which again brings up, like, how the hell does this thing work? Who designs a time machine this way? And this is honestly, like, again, they hadn't figured out the show yet. There's a hint here that it almost feels like the Doctor invented the TARDIS and this machine, and that's why everything is coming apart. Obviously, it didn't go in that direction ultimately, but this, if you had only watched Edge of Destruction and say you were Robert Holmes doing some version of the War Games, you might end up landing somewhere else where the Doctor invented this machine from whatever society he grew up in.
Yeah, you could definitely go in a lot of directions from this. It does work in the Gallifreyan direction. It is interesting, isn't it? After we came from Heaven Sent, where the Doctor talks about, he has a throwaway line of, when I was young and telepathic.
Right.
And there is a moment here where it seems like the Doctor and Susan are sharing a telepathic moment. And I just like the idea. This is my new headcanon, that this is basically the Doctor finding out that the TARDIS is also a bit telepathic.
Mhm.
Like maybe he missed the class on the Type 40 telepathic circuits. He was off romancing the president's wife at that point.
Well, that was an option.
I just completely missed that. But I love the idea. Like, if we ever want to redo this, or like get David Bradley in, let's record some sort of narration over the top of Edge of Destruction, kind of just like the Doctor's thinking, and we hear the Doctor's thoughts, and he's like, "Oh, wait, can the TARDIS hear my thoughts? Wait, did the TARDIS hear me calling it sexy?
Did it like it?
Yeah.
Did I like it?
Yeah.
Wonder where this could go."
Should
Yeah,
I
no,
offer the TARDIS a beverage? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here between those two.
There's definitely a lot of like, is he familiar with his own machine here, right? He just didn't have the hands-on experience. Speaking of stuff they didn't know yet, when Ian is bending over the Doctor and checking him out because he's unconscious, he mentions that the Doctor's heart, singular, seems all right.
Yeah.
Which is okay. What's up with that? And I think we have to explain that away. It's not that hard to headcanon away. Ian's not a medical doctor, number one. If you heard,
he's not a doctor of space medicine. That's for damn sure.
If you heard an echoey heart, you would probably be a lot like Grace Holloway in the TV movie and just dismiss it as some kind of echo, or the double exposure in the X-ray that they say many times in the TV movie, right? Like you're just gonna, in other words, you're gonna Occam's razor it. If you hear it, you're going to just think I'm hearing things, as opposed to this guy must have two hearts. So that's pretty easy to taste over.
If you're listening to this and you're a medical student, do please consider that confirmation bias. Like when you're listening to your patient's heart, double check. Are you not hearing a bit of an echo there? That's not just you staying out late and getting drunk. This might actually be a Time Lord patient. But no, here's why. So lots of attempts have been made to kind of explain this particular bit. And the Doctor Who role-playing game says that if you're playing the first Doctor, or the first Doctor is a character, he has a trait called faulty heart, which results in unconsciousness with only a single heart beating. So there you go.
Well, that's the other thing. Whether it's a first Doctor trait or not, you could argue. I don't think they've ever explicitly said why Time Lords have two hearts, and one presumably takes over when one not takes over, but like they can. It's redundancy is the point, right? So that if one fails, they're still fine, and this might be a case where he just got thrown around too much and one of his hearts failed and he's all right. And he just started up the other one when he had a chance.
And then he's just, it makes sense. Then he's wearing a bit thin for the rest of his Hartnell incarnation, which explains why he kind of messes up words and names and things. Like he's a bit of a, also explains why he's trying not to drink. Throughout this period, bringing us back to the brandy that I utterly failed to get in the emoji challenge. Like we
wasn't
talked a lot
mead
about the Hartnell Doctor, like not drinking alcohol and preferring milk.
That's right.
So
as evidence in the gunfighters,
and here. So the first thing we see in the TARDIS beyond the console room is just, it's so British that I mean, like they could have gone really on the nose here and just had it be like a tea kettle. But no, what they do instead is they just have a dispenser for water and milk, the two ingredients that you need for a cup of tea, assuming you got a tea bag. Water and milk. Like these are the two liquids available on the ship. And you're like, there's a really weirdly long scene where Ian's trying to get water out of that, and it comes out in these little plastic packets.
Yeah, it's like those little juice or applesauce containers you give to kids.
Yeah, you really kind of almost expect him to get a tiny little plastic straw and just kind of, poke through the bag to start But like the camera's on the machine for some time, and you're thinking, water and milk. What the hell? Who has water and milk? Like, that doesn't seem very futuristic, spaceshipy thing to us, does it?
Yeah, not quite a replicator. I guess he got it on discount, perhaps. He's just throwing stuff together. He's putting felt tip notes on the console. He's got like a really cheap water milk machine from maybe the 23rd or 24th century. It's like,
does this? I mean, what kind of milk is it? Is a question that we have to ask. Like, is it an alternative milk? Or are we talking actual bovine, lactation?
Or is it the milk from the planet Luke Skywalker hermit ended up on, one of those creatures, right?
Yeah, blue milk, green milk. Is it one of those? I gotta say, I think maybe this is bringing into sharper focus that what the Doctor says at the beginning of the Time Meddler, when Stephen Taylor finds the Viking helmet. What do you think this is? Space helmet for a cow? Okay, so the Doctor's thinking about cows. Did he perhaps steal a cow on one of his early adventures and just like hook tubes up to its udders and attach it to this machine?
It sounds like something early Hartnell would have done.
Right?
Maybe he got rid of that cow after this episode, which is why we might not. Do we see the water machine ever again? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I don't think we see the Doctor drinking water ever again.
Ever.
Maybe a little dehydrated by now. I'm not sure how long Time Lords can go without water.
Well, it's a fair question. I guess we have some other questions to answer, though, and those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question, why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, I really do want to bring up the sort of the seasonally appropriate programming nature of this. Not just the actual season and Day of the Dead, Halloween, the sense of the barrier between the worlds being very thin, the sense of this actually being scary in a way that, like, modern shows trying to scare you cannot be this scary. There's something scary and wrong with the fundamental nature of Edge of Destruction. So really appropriate that it gave that to us after Halloween and after Heaven Sent, after the mention of the telepathic. But really, Edge of Destruction, people acting all weird. I mean, once again, I don't know which future you are in, dear listener. I'm sort of getting a sense of which future you're in post-election. It's sort of coming into clearer focus for us now here on the 3rd of November. But also, like, I don't want to jinx that. Like, you could be in a really, really terrifying future. And I think that the randomizer knows this, and it sort of hates us, and it's kind of trying to point that out, and it's disorienting us. It's trying to give us vertigo. It may even be trying to shake us off by going back to the beginning of time.
I like that idea.
Right?
Yes. I also like the ambiguity of that too. But what I thought of, I was looking for more connections on the TARDIS and both Planet of the Daleks and Planet of the Planet of the Spiders is just out of view. That's the one we did 4 podcasts ago.
Right.
And they both involve the TARDIS being more than a machine, really. So it's like, obviously you have the telepathic circuits in Planet of the Daleks, but in Planet of the Spiders, there's a couple of almost throwaway moments where the TARDIS just almost pilots itself. One is that on Metebelis, it pinpoints exactly where Sarah is. And I forget exactly what the explanation is there, but there's kind of like you can tune the TARDIS to her telepathic sense or whatever. And then at the end, the TARDIS eventually brings the Doctor home, even though it's like weeks after he first left. And it's only been like a couple minutes for him or whatever. So those are both pretty good sort of indications that the TARDIS can be in tune with its occupants. Yeah. And I also think this is kind of the counterpoint to Heaven Sent, just because that's one of the few episodes of Doctor Who that is no TARDIS at all.
Yes.
It's not seen even for a second.
TARDIS. Memory TARDIS, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, right, true. You can go. He goes in it in his mind, but there's the actual TARDIS isn't in there at all. And this one's just all TARDIS all the time. So it's balancing things out a bit.
He's on the floor, by the way, of his memory TARDIS in
It's true.
Yeah. Just as he's on the floor of the TARDIS here. It's a fine tradition of the Doctor lying down on the job.
Yeah. That's
And
always kind of like a
also-
moment. If the Doctor's lying down on the TARDIS floor, something has gone deeply wrong unless he's
Right.
fixing it. You know?
Yeah, right. But by the way, it's interesting to hear like the klaxon, right? The alarm sound, and think,
Right.
well, where's the cloister bell? It's definitely
Maybe that was it. It had, that was the early noise. It's like a ringtone. You could pick whatever you want, right? So he did the actual bell later.
Yeah, when he gets his different desktop, his different OS, it comes with different cloister bell sounds.
It's like TARDIS OS 18.7. The cloister beep is now the cloister bell.
Yes, it's got on the release notes. We've removed the fast return switch.
Exactly.
After hearing a lot of complaints from our users. But
speaking of,
so to connect with the Time Warrior, I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned that. That's obviously the most recent one we came from. Now, it's not just the connection, I think, with the general connection with the Pertwee era, which that's when we start to get the Doctor saying the TARDIS is definitely this living thing, right?
Right.
All that in Planet of the Daleks. But in the Time Warrior, there's also this connection of like, we have to explain why Sarah Jane Smith goes into the TARDIS and comes out and thinks that she hasn't traveled in time, right? She goes into this, control room. Well, here we have a sense that the TARDIS can maybe sort of induce amnesia. That maybe that's part of its defense mechanism. So
it's true, yeah.
Maybe this is the randomizer giving us some headcanon about that. That's why Sarah doesn't realize that she's in a time machine.
Maybe it's a little suspicious of Sarah at first. Maybe you won't be a companion, Maybe we're just going to keep, hedge our bets here. And then, that actually serves a little bit of a basis for the whole retcon drug in Torchwood.
Yes.
Just jumbles things up a bit. I like that.
Absolutely. Torchwood, and also in Face the Raven. Right before Heaven Sent. But yeah, you've got to look at this also through the, going way back to where we did The Doctor's Wife. Like the whole sense that the TARDIS kind of just, like it's testing the companions here. That it doesn't like the Doctor bringing home strays. And this is its first attempt to throw companions off. And maybe that was what was going on in the Time Warrior. It's a little suspect of Sarah Jane. It's like, oh, you let a journalist in, Doctor. That's bad. That's bad. Don't tell the press about.
It's high risk. Here. It's very high risk. That's for sure.
You didn't say anything about off the record, Doctor. Come on.
Not bad.
Media training 101.
Okay, moving on to the second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded? Okay, so what is the evil plot?
Yes.
Is there one?
Whose is the evil plot? Is it the TARDIS's?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is that the story seemingly, like when I first saw this and wasn't really paying too close attention to the actual words they say in the dialogue, I thought they were going back to the Big Bang. But there's fairly clear dialogue that the Doctor's talking about the beginning of a solar system.
Yes.
The formation of one.
In the novelization, which we haven't talked much about, it's changed to the birth of a galaxy, the birth of the Milky Way galaxy.
And none of those really make a ton of sense because, like, we've seen the beginning of the solar system seemingly in, the beginning of the Earth anyway, in The Runaway Bride. And it's basically like all of these things. Again, the birth of a galaxy. How were the galaxies born? I guess. This is like a bunch of stars and black holes. I don't think we really know a lot about galaxy formation. The thing about the beginning of the universe, it's the most plausible ultimate destruction that the TARDIS would face. Not that all those other things are easy, and certainly not in the beginning of the show when they hadn't yet established the TARDIS is indestructible. But you kind of have to reconcile all this stuff, right? So and also the fast return switch, because if it keeps just going and going and going, isn't the logical endpoint to that event one, essentially? Like it's going to eventually reach the Big Bang. So that's kind of what I see as the evil plot succeeding, that it just keeps going back and back and back, and it encounters the destruction that it's trying to avoid, and everybody dies. So it's a pretty easy end to see at the end of this sort of fast return switch rainbow. And if you take it to mean literally the universe, it's going to encounter Terminus.
I was going to say, let's bring in Terminus. Let's
Yeah.
bring in the fuel explosion
Right.
that causes the Big Bang. The Doctor definitely. Okay, first of all, by the way, when you were just saying like we've seen the formation of the solar system in Runaway Bride, I'm like, wow, why didn't the TARDIS show the Doctor a picture of the Ragnos in the middle of all of these other? It's showing me a photo of a large spider.
Well, they
creature.
don't say which solar system. That's kind of the problem, right? So is it Skaro?
Yeah, there's also a brief shot of a planet that's in the fourth universe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they do say that. They just use a lot of these terms in just interchangeably. I mean, sciencey terms. You could again, it's children's programming. You would just say things like molecule, and it would sound scientific, right?
Right.
I
mean, thank goodness that the Doctor Who gave up its technobabble. And we never heard any of it again. Like everything made absolute sense from this point on.
Well, it's funny that that's how you get technobabble, though, right?
Yeah.
Because if you use real terms, you're either going to date what you're doing because those will either fall out of the cutting edge and just be something normal when you look back on it 40 years later, or you have some nonsense that is just something from a parallel universe, which is kind of the route Star Trek takes, right? They just make up stuff that it might or might not have any scientific basis, but it's all what you call Star Trek physics. Whereas here they're kind of trying to use terms and trying to sort of put in real science, but it kind of ends up being more confusing once you have both more of the show established and more science established, right? Because now we've studied a lot more about cosmology. We know a lot more about black holes and how things are formed, et cetera. Although still, I'm actually, someone write in. Do we know how galaxies are formed? I really don't know.
Let's get our friend Ellie Blackwood.
Hey, there you go.
On the podcast. She was with us for Impossible Planet, and Saint Pitt told us all about planets. And Ellie, if you're listening, let us know. Please help us out here. Give us some NASA knowledge. I'm going to say that, like, we're considering this that it's the TARDIS's evil plot, right? I'm going to say actually the evil plot here is the Doctor's.
Yeah, it's the Doctor's. Yeah, come on. He broke the switch.
He broke the switch. He hasn't, the whole thing is like almost a Shaggy Dog story about how the fault locator doesn't locate a fault on a switch that's jammed because it's not a fault. So it's not locating a fault. That doesn't make sense. I think the Doctor just doesn't understand the fault locator. I think he's not read the manual. I think that isn't that canon that he threw the manual out at some point?
Well, the manual, Romana brings it up in the pirate planet. So he must have had a backup copy if he did that. But yeah, I mean, you could argue that his evil plot is that he's just really bad at TARDISing. But the other evil plot is obviously he throws out Ian and Barbara.
Yes.
Which would be a really dark success of the evil plot if he ends up doing that. Presumably they die, and then he either can't live with himself or that changes him in a different direction, and he essentially becomes the master after this episode, right? So
or he just turns himself in. He's like, oh my god, I was being so weird. I roofied my companions and then I threw them out. Like I'm not fit for purpose. I'm not good at traveling. I'm going back to Gallifrey. I'm going to tell them everything I know about the hybrid.
Yeah. Well, I like to think that, I like to think that that is what the Doctor would do. And I think given how he behaves at the end of this one, and he seems to have real deep regret about what he did.
Yeah. He didn't even need any note cards.
Didn't need note cards. He was, he came to Barbara, asked for forgiveness, has a nice final line about learning about ourselves by how we treat others and how our encounters with others. It's like, this is it. This is kind of the beginning of the person that we come to know as the Doctor. And I would even argue the first Doctor, right? Because he's different after this. He's more grandfatherly. And I'll bookend this with, I think, one of the best scenes in his final season, which we've done, which is the Smugglers. where he has a character arc where he, by the end of his run, talks about his moral obligation to people and the places he goes to. And again, I'd say the beginning of it is here, not in An Unearthly Child.
Yeah, and he arguably does, because of this, have this great revelation about how like awesome the formation of the universe is. Right, he has that great little speech there, and it's almost like he's kind of realizing it for the first time. Like he went on this adventure without fully understanding the scope of everything.
Yeah.
And now he really gets it for the first time. So, yeah. If it had succeeded, if his evil plan had succeeded, he wouldn't be the Doctor we know today. He wouldn't like have that same sense of wanderlust.
Definitely not. It's good he has companions to show him the way. There may be another companion that is helping in that regard. That's why we have to go to the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter? Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of the name of the Doctor. She's somewhere in every single Doctor Who story. Where is she in The Edge of Destruction?
Yes, and in which part of the TARDIS is she hiding? I mean, just talking before about the note cards, thinking about the note cards, obviously a reference to Capaldi, the note cards that Clara made for him that we see in, Under the Lake Before the Flood. He's flipping through them. One of them says, "Sorry, I dropped you off in Aberdeen." It's just a wonderful callback. And I just love the idea of somehow Clara has brought the first Doctor those same note cards, and he's sitting down next to Barbara, and he's like looking through these things, like trying to figure out how to apologize to her. Barbara, my dear, I'm sorry I left you in Aberdeen. Wait, what? No, that must be from my future. So
I like that. Yeah. She's leaving him the note cards. And
she's leaving note cards. I mean, obviously, there's so much to explain here in terms of like, how the hell did Barbara know what melted clocks and flashes of light mean? Like, how did she get that? You got to feel like Time Lady Clara, who made the Doctor steal the Type 40, this busted old Type 40 in the first place, is involved here somehow, right?
Well, maybe she seeded some kind of logic problem or short story that Barbara reads before she even goes on her adventures with the Doctor. And that's what she taps into and sort of putting all these clues together. Time being taken away from her. Maybe she read some cool sci-fi novella and that it was by Time Lady. I like that. I like Clara left her that.
Yeah. That's kind of a good one. I mean, you definitely get the sense that Edge of Destruction is somehow necessary in the Doctor's development, right? He learns that he needs companions. He learns that his machine is alive. Like, these are major, major revelations that affect the entire history of Doctor Who. And if Clara's there looking out for him, and cleaning up what the Great Intelligence might try to do. Great Intelligence might be the thing that got into the TARDIS here, and when the doors opened for no apparent reason.
That's another thing we didn't mention too much, but it's not. It's just kind of a neat way to mislead the audience, I think, where it's like, oh, something came in, something invisible, something has gotten into our minds, and it's not really. It's actually the TARDIS has done that. So yeah, it's kind of neat.
Maybe maybe this is part of the long game of making sure that the Doctor doesn't drink coffee, which we talked about in past Paul Opens.
Just milk and water, and then later wine.
Would definitely nudge him, I think, in the direction of tea.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah,
that's all I got. She's somewhere obviously off screen. She's not doing anything here. I don't think she can be on the TARDIS, but she might have sold him the clock. Or if she didn't sell him the weird ass clock, she definitely put it in the TARDIS as Time Lady Clara, who we saw in The Name of the Doctor. So even before he walks in, I'm going to make sure there's this weird clock with hands with a low melting point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's what you've just given me some lovely ideas here, because the Clara Splinter, like, we're always assuming that she lands on fertile ground, as it were. But some, as we know from the Bible, some seeds that you sow don't land on fertile ground. It's got to be some Clara Splinters where their scheme didn't quite work, right? So I'm thinking that this Clara Splinter was with Salvador Dali, She gives him the idea of the melting clocks with the idea that she's going to take that painting, the persistence of memory, and bring it to the TARDIS in the same way that, we get the Van Gogh painting, foretelling the destruction of the TARDIS. And that's what Barbara is supposed to notice. She's like, wait a minute, melting clocks? What could that mean? Why is this Dali painting here? But it didn't actually work out, and the Doctor didn't go visit Salvador Dali after all.
Not bad, not bad. All right, that's plenty of possibilities for our Clara Splinter, and now we must move on to the final question. The ultimate question, the only question we're going to get to after I tell you to go to our website at pulltoopen.net for full notes on every single story that we talk about in our random journey. That's right. You can just subscribe to our newsletter there, and you will get it around the same time you get the podcast. You can also, of course, follow us on the socials. We're at Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63 on all kinds of networks, including TikTok, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. There's probably one or two I'm forgetting, but just go Google it. Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63. And now we are at the final question, the only question that matters for the Edge of Destruction. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has 7 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a not-so-great episode, but hey, at least they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a show beyond rating, usually for reasons of nostalgia. The Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, at least it looks good. And the Zarbi, which is so bad, it's good.
Well, as Pull to Open listeners know, time can be rewritten. And I want to address the fact that the very next story in this, in Doctor Who history is Marco Polo. And that Pete, you were most outraged at my Marco Polo rating. Sort of become part of Pull to Open lore at this point. Because I rated it a fixed point in time because
you did.
Of the telesnaps. Because it was just like not possible. Now, the more I've thought about Marco Polo, the more I think it deserves a natural rating. So I'm going to be a little bit timey-wimey and say I'd like to change my Marco Polo rating.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
The reason that I want to change it is because I think this is the fixed point in time.
Okay.
This is the Edge of Destruction is so fixed point in timey. I can't even. I mean, it's like it's the early part of the show. It was a hedge against cancellation. It was David Whittaker tossing it off in a few minutes, and yet and it's not that good in itself, right? In itself, it's just like, unless Whittaker's like deliberately trying to be all artsy and modern and like, have this weird dialogue, and nobody know, even the actors didn't know what they were saying. They just had fun shouting at each other, according to Jacqueline Hill. Like it just, and yet it gives us so much about, the Doctor, companions, the TARDIS. It sets in motion. There's one Doctor Who commentator. It brings up Katamari Damacy, if you know that name. The idea where you roll a giant ball and it just sort of picks up stuff as you roll it. Right. This is Doctor Who is a giant Katamari, and the early stuff that it picks up sort of defines the outsides of where it is later on. Like this is. Like it's hard to see the modern TARDIS being the same without Edge of Destruction, right? So, the whole hit it with a hammer aesthetic really starts here. And so I think it's just a fixed point in time because, like, you can't judge it on its own merits. It's early Doctor Who. Like, David Whittaker wasn't trying to win any awards with this. He was just trying to do a bit of filler. And so, I think this is the kind of thing that fixed point in time was created for.
Well, I agree with you that it's not award-winning, but I would say I'm going to go further than you are and say it's good. I'm calling this a Dalek, and it's really way better than it has a right to be. And I like the whole David Whittaker story here because as a writer, I know that sometimes you just have a deadline and you have to start writing. And sometimes you just kind of almost don't know what you're even going to write until you sit down in front of the keyboard and your just stuff starts coming out of you. And sometimes you get into huge trouble and you end up phoning in something. And sometimes something comes out that's like, whoa, I didn't know I even had that in me. And it's just there. And that feels like what happened here. I would tend to agree it's not the best of the best. This is definitely not a Viscount banger. But there's a lot of good shouting between everyone, and everyone sort of seems to be very sure of themselves, particularly Hartnell, when they're doing things like that and interacting with each other. I also just want to shout out a little more for Carol Ann Ford. Now, I think she, for most of her run, she's given the short shrift. She's often sick or just sort of brushed aside or treated like a child. And that's unfortunate. And I think a lot of that sort of led to her leaving the show. Here, it's a very short stint. And again, I'm not holding this up as something with a lot of meat, but I would say she has probably the most memorable moments in it, like particularly with those scissors and her intense look that she retains, whether she's got scissors or not, shows there's some talent there. I think this is one of her better episodes. It's unfortunate she didn't get more. But I'm going to shout her out here as probably the best thing about this whole thing in terms of performances. So anyway,
she seems to be wearing, when she's lying down at one point, I mean, I'll say I've not dared watch this more than once. Like, it's so sort of weirdly creepy in a not good way to me that like I kind of resisted watching it again. But there's one point in which she appears to be wearing a handmaid's costume, like the Handmaid's Tale. Like that's a little weird, but it really looks great. It really enhances the sort of otherworldliness of her.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. She understood the assignment. I think what really elevates this thing, though, is the final scene between the Doctor and Barbara, and how that really sort of sets off, I think, the first Doctor's character arc. And I don't think all the stuff at the end would work quite as well without this clear turning point in what his journey is, and it's clearly because of his companions that are new. And I'm really glad they ran with that ball in Hunters of the Burning Stone and created such a great, just an epic comic book episode at the 50th anniversary. So, yep, full Dalek for me.
Cool. Well, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the Dalek fixed point in time combo. Although if you are looking at Dalek right now, do not hit the fast return switch on that thing. Do not make the Dalek a fixed point in time. That could be very bad. But yes, we have the hybrid of the Dalek and the fixed point in time. That is our final rating. And it's time now for us to step away, to step back from the brink, from the edge of destruction, from the brink of disaster that William Hartnell fails to say in his dialogue. But it's time for us to step into our TARDIS. Once the fast return switch is stuck, well, I guess we better use the randomizer again. One of these days we're going to fast return to Planet of Fire, our very first random story.
Yeah, man. Our Polta opens and horseshoe, don't you know? Of course we're going to come back around. But no, not yet. We have a big spreadsheet that you can link to in the show notes of every single Doctor Who televised story in sequential order. And what we will do from that part of the randomizer, which is known as the Codex, we're going to apply the other part of the randomizer, which is the Executor. Yes. And Chris is at the controls of that, which we'll find out exactly which adventure we're going to go to.
Played by random.org in a leading role. It's definitely going to get an award for most random device in a leading role on Pull to Open. But we use atmospheric noise via random.org instead of algorithmic randomness. Most computers, when they tell you they're being random, they're not actually just going through strings of numbers, kind of guessing at which one's random. That's pseudo-random. This is true randomness. It uses...
The real deal?
It uses stuff outside the ship, whatever it is, whatever's bouncing around the atmosphere. I don't know. It might be a little creepy. It might be the beginnings of a solar system bouncing around up there. But what the codex tells us is how many stories we have left to generate a random number from. Pete, what is the magic number?
That's 181.
181.
It's a palindrome.
Palindromic. Hey, Jinx. Palindromic here on Pull to Open. Palindrome to open. Okay, but before I hit generate on the Min 1 Max 181 button, we'd like to issue some challenges to the randomizer. Challenges request, please. I'm going to go first. I'm going to say that because you made this very clever political pun of being on the edge of destruction, and we've looked a lot.
I did that?
No. I'm talking to the randomizer.
Oh, okay.
You gave us something of a political pun with the U.S. election, saying we're on the edge of destruction. But I'm going to say, yeah, let's get a little more political. Let's get another episode with a prime minister in it, or some leadership, some government, something that is a political analogy. Doctor Who shot through with them. I have a feeling that by the time we come around to watch this or do the next episode, we might be sick of politics, but maybe we won't be. So yeah, bring it. Bring us some politics, some leadership.
That works. I'm usually casting a wide net when I make my request to the randomizer. I like to give it a lot of things to choose from. But you know what? I'm going to be the opposite today. I'm literally going to hit the fast return switch from the edge of destruction. Give us something prior to it, which is only 2 adventures.
Whoa.
Only An Unearthly Child or the Daleks.
Wow.
Let's take us all the way back. You didn't do it completely, randomizer. Go all the way.
You are not quite putting all your chips on a single number, but you're putting all your chips on 2 single numbers.
Yeah. Also, I know it's going to do the opposite. So
yeah, of course.
Although maybe this is where we find out time really is a ring. So literally, I could mean anything.
Yes.
Could take us anywhere.
It could take us anywhere. It could take us the very last, most recent. It could take us to
it's done that already.
Legend of Ruby Sunday, Empire of Death. It could technically take us to.
Could be.
Yeah, speaking of stories where the TARDIS is all messed up. All right, well, let's find out where our TARDIS is going next. Pete, give me a countdown. I'll hit the generate button.
In 4, 3, 2, 1.
Run, you clever boy.
102.
Ooh, definitely not what I asked for.
Yeah, probably New Who.
It's New Who. It is Gridlock.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
That is okay. So the randomizer is telling us that it's going to be a very tight election, and that we're actually not even going to know the result. We're going to be in political gridlock. So thanks, randomizer. I guess I'll go place a bet on Polymarket after this.
It did kind of do the opposite of me, because I did ask for let's go back in time, and I was clear about I was talking about the show, not the universe within the show. But it did go instead into the far future. This is arguably as far in the future as the Doctor has gone, apart from the end of the universe.
Yes,
because this is even after New Earth, which is like 5 billion years in the future or something.
That's right. So, this is the end of the Face of Bo, right? This is the one where the Face of Bo dies?
I believe so. Yeah, that's right. No spoilers.
Spoilers for people who haven't seen it. But if you haven't seen it, why haven't you seen it? Go see it.
Right? Come on. All right, folks. This has been good times here with Pull to Open, which of course is a podcast. Podcast is a great thing to follow or subscribe to if you haven't done that already. But the absolute number one best thing you could possibly do for this here podcast is to share it with a friend. Spread the word on Pull to Open however you can, and we'd be eternally grateful. Once again, we are on all the socials, Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63. You can also follow us on Patreon or Spotify or YouTube and become a true companion and all that stuff. I won't repeat all that here, although I kind of just did. Thanks so much, Martin West, for your music. It's rocking it always. And yes, we'll see you in traffic in a few billion years.
We'll see you 5 billion years in the future. In the meantime, yes, do share Pull to Open with a friend by writing Pull to Open on their phone screen in felt tip pen.
Take it easy, folks.